Today, we are going over 3 simple tips that can seriously increase how much you harvest from every grow. Come on, let's get into it. But before we do, today's video is brought to you by Real Growers Grow Dots, the easiest way to feed your high-value plants. You mix grow dots in once at the beginning of your grow, and they feed your plants all the way to harvest. You don't have to worry about nutrient burn or nutrient lockout. Grow Dots does all the hard work for you. Check them out over at realgrowers.com. And while you're there, use coupon code Scotty420 to get 20% off your first order. Now let's get back to the show. Come on, High C. You know, a lot of people still are definitely growing for yields.
I am, you've persuaded me to care more about quality.
Sure.
But I do still love it when I see big, giant buds on my plants.
Yeah, me too. I got to be, I'm devoting a decent amount of square footage and a decent amount of time and energy to these things. I get a little popcorn nugs on there. I want some baby's arms, man.
Yeah, it's not as exciting, doesn't make as good Instagram pics when you got a bunch of tiny little fluffy buds. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some ways to get some big harvest.
Sure, let's do it, man. All right, first one, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's always a super top priority, and that is you'll never outperform your genetics, all right? So if you want big yields, you have to start with a big yielding genetic.
I know that one of friends of the show, Maestro.
Yeah.
His favorite plant to grow for the effects, he says it's almost impossible to get big yields out of it just because of the genetics.
Yeah, it's like some haze cross that's 12 weeks to flower up. I mean, just think about all the time he's got invested in that. Now, he's a cancer survivor. He uses cannabis as medicine. So that specific strain with that specific terpene profile, he likes it, and it's fine. None of us are commercial growers anymore.
But
Friends.
It goes back to the point that the genetics of the plant will affect what you get out of it.
Absolutely. And now that cannabis is legal and all over the place, you're seeing there's a lot of people that aren't growing for weight. There's a lot of breeders that are not growing for weight anymore. So if you're looking for a strain, man, you have to inquire. Don't just pick something and assume that it's going to yield. Inquire, and then look at the parents too. I mean, you can do a little bit of searching, and I mean, like the most obvious one is Big Bud. Big Bud, it's got to be 15 years old.
Name.
Well, yeah, just the name. And then another one I think of, a real old classic, is Blue Dream. They called it Blue Dream because it was easy to grow and it grew these huge buds. Same with Critical Mass. You know what I call it, Critical Mass?
You get Critical Mass.
Yes. And then Gorilla Glue #4 was one for me that I grew for years. It was such a winner, great quality, and really big buds. So there's so many more. But when you're looking for your breeder, when you're looking for your strain, make sure it's a yielder. It'll say it.
And I think the important thing too here is there are a lot of plants that will give you those big buds that you don't have to sacrifice quality. You can get both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why they mix them. That's why they cross them and hybridize them. They can take something that's incredibly frosty, mix it with something that's really big, like that Big Bud. They use that as starting material for a lot of strains.
Okay, so genetics matter.
Sure.
Let's assume we're starting off with a high yielder. What's some of the other things that we can do to maximize the harvest that we get?
Sure. I got to fill that grow space. Whatever grow space I'm giving that plant, I need to fill it up with big buds. So I'm going to train it. I don't want, if you're growing that style, the Sea Green style, you just let it go really quick. You grow one stem with one bud on it, and you just jam them really close together. You can do that, but with plant counts and stuff, man, I will take a plant, I grow it in a real bucket, essentially a 4 or 5 gallon container, and then I will let it fill up this space, and I will either top it and train it or stake it and train it. You can either do a high stress training, which is topping it, or low stress training, which is just bending the branches down. And the idea behind that is, remember you've watched the shows before, we talk about those hormones, the auxins and the gibberellins and the cytokinins. Well, the auxins are made up in the leaf and they keep the plant growing up high. Well, all those nutrients just go to the highest point. So you end up getting one big giant bud.
And, I'm not a big fan of the big giant bud in the middle because a lot of times when I've done that in the past, you end up with a bud that's all frosty on the outside, but then when you start breaking it up, there's
Sure.
not very much frost inside of that big bud.
Yep, it's plant material in there. And then the light has to be so far away that all your bottom buds don't get enough light to be big.
Yeah, so you got me into topping
Yep.
for that reason. Training, though, let's talk about that.
Yeah, all this stuff, you're really directing those hormones. So the auxins that are going to make the apical dominance is going to make the plant grow tall. That works in tandem with those gibberellins we talked about. That makes the plant stretch. And when you suppress both of those by cutting the tops off, or even if you low stress train them, and you just make sure that they're not the tops anymore. You're bending them over, so now it works by gravity. So if you do that now, you encourage these cytokinins that come up from the roots, make side branches, and then you get this much more branchier and even canopy. So you get a canopy with more, budding sites, for lack of a better word. I have 5, 6, 7. Geez, I just staked them a couple days ago. I was surprised how many stakes I needed for each plant. And the idea is you don't let everything go to that one top. You either bend it sideways, you remove the top, but you are redistributing those growth hormones.
And then you've got those hormones going to multiple sites, and so you're
Yep.
getting a bunch of different budding sites.
Yes, and now you can also keep your light equidistant to all the buds. Man, think of, light dissipates in intensity. A single source of light, it'll dissipate in intensity. So if you have that light all the way up to the ceiling because you've got a 4-foot single cola, man, you're leaving a lot of that energy. You're leaving it on the table.
So by doing it this way, you're not only getting multiple budding sites, but all of those budding sites are getting pretty close to the same amount of light.
Yep.
And so you're getting good buds from all over the plant rather than just one big bud in the middle.
And what are we talking about? Light is the energy, right? Light is the energy that it takes in order to grab that CO2 and turn it into plant material. We need carbon to make plant material, and we're ripping that carbon off of that oxygen. And so the light is the energy. I like to think that the CO2 is the food, and the light is how fast our mouth is moving. Give me more bites.
Okay, so let's actually talk about that. That's
Sure.
kind of our third tip for the day.
Yeah.
Adding some supplemental CO2 to your grow.
Absolutely. Because if we're talking yields, we need to increase photosynthesis. You can increase photosynthesis by turning up your light and matching it with CO2. Light is the energy. I like to say it's like it's like a mouth chewing the carbon off the oxygen. So if you have a lot of light, you've got a lot of energy. That mouth is moving really fast. It's ready to work. But if there's no food there, if it's waiting for its next bite of food because it's 400 ppm of CO2, then it's not really effective. You might as well slow that down. So you got to match both of those. You got to make sure if you're spending energy to move the mouth, you got to have food to efficiently feed it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of growers, they focus on the light. They think if they get a bigger, better light,
Right.
they'll get bigger, better yields. But your theory or your experience is, I look in your grow, you've got extra CO2. You got CO2 tanks.
Yeah.
You've got all kinds of extra CO2 in there.
I mean, why would I bother growing 9 hungry plants if I can't feed them? So if I have these plants going, I have all this light energy. What am I at? 1,000, 1,100 ppfd. I run a lot of light in there, and I run 1,000, 1,100 ppm of CO2. So I match it. And I was messing around with this equation yesterday. Not an equation. I was like, can you just match your ppfd of light to your ppm of CO2? Yeah, it works out. I mean, exactly, no. When you get up in a little bit higher ranges, it's not an exact match. But yeah, if you have 600 ppfd of light and 600 ppm of CO2, it's a pretty good match. You bring it up to 800 ppfd of light and add 800 ppm of CO2. Yeah, I mean, 1,000, it works, man. And just to be clear, ambient CO2, meaning the CO2, the air that we're breathing right now, there's about 400 parts per million of CO2 in the air right now. So if you're running, 400 ppfd of light, not very intense light, well, then there's enough air or enough CO2 in the air rather for your plant to do just fine. As fast as the mouth is moving, there's another spoonful of CO2 for it to eat. When you start getting up, like I said, you can go up to 600 ppfd. Well, the plant could eat more than the food is available. There's only 400 ppm of carbon, of CO2, and the plant's mouth is moving. The metabolism, we got the metabolism ramped up. If you get it up to 1,000 ppfd, you have ramped that metabolism up, and it needs food. If you're giving it the same 400 ppm, it can only take slow bites. It might be chomping it, but it's chomping at nothing. Gets a bite every 10 chomps.
So how do you go about adding more CO2 into your grow?
I use tanks. I use CO2 tanks. It's expensive. It's inconvenient. Thank God my warehouse is right by 2 welding stores, and I'm in Colorado, so I don't have to lie. I'm like, yeah, put that under real growers. The excuses I used to have to make when I'd go get CO2 were pretty funny back in the day. I used it to clear pipes out. I'm a plumber. Yeah, kid. But yeah, so you can use tanks. If you're in a bigger room, you can use a CO2 burner. I have had real good experiences with those. It's just making greenhouse gas. You're literally taking propane, burning it like you would a barbecue, and that makes CO2. You can do that. I have problems with that in smaller rooms. I used to do that when I would do large warehouse grows. In smaller rooms, they put that smell stuff. They call it ethyl mercaptan. They put this stuff in, so if it's leaking, you smell it. Mm-hmm. I have a theory that something happens when you burn that in a small space. The plants just don't I don't know, but I don't like burners for a small space. I recommend tanks. Oh, hey, one last thing. I'm looking at a 2x4 tent over here, which I very rarely grow in something that small, but they do have those mushroom bags, those CO2 exhale bags. I don't have a ton of experience with them. I don't know how much CO2 they make, but that is an option if you have something like a little 2x4 tent. And let me know in the comments if those are a game changer.
And if I'm using something like one of those mushroom bags, am I able to meter and look at how much CO2 is in there? Man,
I guess if you're going to do that, by the way, monitoring and controlling your CO2 used to be a fortune. I think I spent 20 years ago, $700 on a CO2 monitor controller.
Wow.
Yeah. AC Infinity, a friend of mine or a friend of the show, not a friend of mine, they're good people. They make one, I think it's like 100 and low hundreds, but it's a CO2 monitor controller. But yeah, CO2 is expensive. So if you're going to spend the money on the tank and the regulator, spend another couple $100 on a monitor controller. You want to keep it in that zone. If you're running 600 ppm of light, you don't want to run, ppfd of light. You don't want to run 1,000 ppm or 1,200 ppm of CO2. It's wasted.
Then you get the other problem where you've got more food than your mouth can chew.
Yes. So what happens, man? It's just wasted. It's just we're going to get vented out. Hey, but those are my 3 best tricks for stacking on weight, for getting more yield out of your grow space. I've got genetics, which is super important. Training, absolutely important. And then getting enough light and CO2 in there. But what about you? What is your best tip for adding on weight? Come on, let me know in the comments. And if you dug this video, come on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Share this one with another grower you know, and check out the other couple of videos YouTube's recommended.